The Bayesian Superyacht just claimed another life, but this time it wasn't a billionaire passenger, it was a commercial diver just like myself. Now, the diver was 39-year-old Rob Huijben, who was a Dutch national working for SMIT Salvage. Now, the initial news reports were possible seizures or heart attacks. It was a health-related issue is what was being put out there by the media. Now, the story is that he was working on the mast and either a piece of metal crushed him or there was an explosion that killed him. So we're going to dive into the salvage operations and look at the possible causes of this tragic death. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Bayesian, it was a sailing super yacht known for having the tallest mast in the world at the time of its construction. The mast itself was about 72 meters or about 236 feet. Now, the Bayesian sank on August 19th, 2024 during a sudden and violent storm, which caused a downburst. And essentially what most people think happened is that the Bayesian with that tall mast tipped over during that storm and it was unable to right itself and it flooded with water instantly. Reportedly, within 16 minutes, it had filled with water and sank. Now, there are some conspiracies around this, whether it's just pure negligence from the captain and the crew, or it was reported that Mike Lynch had top secret information from MI6, and there was information in safes on hard drives inside of the vessel. And it's also ironic that Mike Lynch and his partner had just beat a decade-long trial versus HP Hewlett-Packard. They had just beat this case, and within days of each other, him and his business partner were both found dead. Now, I want to stick to the salvage operations, so let's just briefly go over everything to give you guys an idea of what the plan was. Now, the salvage operation involves three key players. The first one being TMC Maritime. They're overseeing the entire operation, making sure that everything runs smoothly. The salvage contractor was SMIT Salvage. Now, you may have seen them before because they led the salvage operations for the Costa Concordia cruise ship when that cruise ship ran aground and was stuck on a reef. It was a very long and complex diving operation. Now, the third is going to be HEBO Maritime Service. They're providing some very massive barges and cranes to help lift this vessel out of the water. Now, those two barges are going to be the HEBO Lift 10 and the HEBO Lift 2 cranes. The HEBO Lift 10 is one of Europe's most powerful maritime cranes, and it has a lifting capacity of 2,200 tons. The HEBO Lift 2 is a multi-purpose crane barge. It has a lifting capacity of 300 tons, but this also has another critical job. Now, this is where the diving equipment, the full dive spread, the dive shack, all the diving gases, as well as ROVs and ROV pilots are going to be stationed. Now, the salvage plan was going to be carried out in a few different phases. So the initial phase is going to involve reconnaissance. So the first thing they're going to do when they mobilize everything on site is send down the ROVs. The ROVs are going to do an inspection on the entire vessel, see where everything's laying. It's been down there for 8 or 9 months, so there's potential of additional corrosion, weak points, things that we need to watch out for. Once the ROVs complete their inspection, then the divers are going to go down and do their inspection. They're pretty much going to confirm everything that the ROV is seeing, get a feel for the entire work site, take measurements if they need to, and then just put hands on the hardware and everything that they're dealing with. Keep in mind, this is not a small vessel, a small sailboat. The mast itself was 270 feet tall, which is now laying down on its side. Now, here's some photos of crew actually working on the mast itself, just to give you a perspective of the size and the nature of everything that we're dealing with here. This is a very massive undertaking. Now, once the reconnaissance dives are done, they can finalize the dive plan and then begin dismantling the mast. So during the planning for this operation, TMC Maritime determined that the mast was not critical to this investigation. They're going to cut it and leave it on the seafloor while they salvage the rest of the vessel. Now to remove the mast, there is not just the mast itself. The mast itself is, yes, it's pretty large and it's a big section of equipment, but there's also lots of other rigging that holds the mast in place. If you guys have ever seen guy wires that are holding tension on telephone poles, well, the rigging on a sailing vessel is providing similar stability. Now, the other thing that they have to cut is the boom for the mast. Now, from my understanding, this mast is going to be cut into sections, and it sounds like they may have been working on the boom for this mast, which is this section right here. Now, the next phase that they're going to do is remove all of the fuel. There is about 18,000 liters of diesel that needs to get pumped out of there. So they're going to do what's called hot tapping. We covered this in the previous in our previous Bayesian video. So the divers are going to drill a hole into the fuel tanks and pump that fuel back up to the surface onto the barge, and where it's going to be contained, and then they can get rid of it. Now, another thing that they're going to do to minimize environmental risks is they're going to lay an oil boom around the entire work site. So any oil that floats up to the surface or fuel, it's going to get captured in this oil boom. The next phase is lifting the yacht. So they're going to place slings, sort of like belly straps, underneath the hull, connect it to cables and rigging on the HEBO Lift 10, and then it's going to bring the vessel up to the surface. Now the Bayesian weighs about 550 tons and the HEBO Lift 10 has a lifting capacity of about 2,200 tons. So it's going to have no problems lifting this. Now, once the vessel is oriented straight up and down, they're going to raise the vessel until the deck breaks the surface. Then they're going to take dewatering pumps and put them inside of the vessel to remove water from the vessel, restoring the vessel's buoyancy, and then they can tow it into port. Now, the port that they're going to tow this into and complete the investigation is called Termini Imerese. This is where the final investigation and forensic examination is going to take place. Now you have an idea of the salvage plan for the Bayesian. Let's go back to phase 2. So removing the mast. So they already completed the inspection and the reconnaissance dives. Now the next phase was working on removing that 72-meter mast. Just keep in mind, this was a towering structure. And here's a couple photos here of when they were working on the mast and refitting it on this super yacht. You can see the cranes next to this also. So just to give you guys a better perspective of truly how massive of a mast this was. It was the largest in the world at its time of construction. Now to remove the mast, this is large hardware. We're talking stainless cable, stainless rigging, stainless bolts, and then the mast itself was heavy duty aluminum. So you're not just going to go down there with hand tools and cut this and expect everything to go well. So divers use a few different options here. One of our favorite tools is hydraulics. So we can use underwater saws, underwater grinders, underwater chainsaws, all hydraulic powered, all are very common in salvage operations. Now the most common method and the most brute force method to quickly dismantle something large underwater is what we like to call burning. It's identical to air arcing, if you have ever seen that, air arcing or air gouging, but instead we use oxygen. So it pretty much uses heat at about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit and oxygen to cut through pretty much anything. The most common materials are going to be steel or metals, but we can also cut through concrete with these. Now, the biggest danger with this method are explosions. So for example, if we are cutting into a pipe or a piling, and there is gas trapped inside of there. It doesn't have to be pressurized gas. It could be gas from our air bubbles, from our mask or something like that. If we hit a large pocket of gas, we're instantly going to ignite that pocket of gas, and it is a loud explosion. I know a diver that was burning underwater. He hit a pocket of gas. It broke his faceplate on his helmet, and he's still scarred to this day. So it can be very deadly. Now, to avoid this, we have to first drill vent holes. So if there's any possibility that gas would be trapped inside of a structure that we're cutting, we need to drill vent holes so that gas can escape. And not only so that the existing gas can escape, but we also are producing gas as we are cutting. So those vent holes have to be able to keep up with all of the gas that we are creating, because if enough gas builds up and makes a pocket, then we could ignite our own gas pocket and kill ourselves. So there's rumors of explosions. That could definitely be one of the causes that led to this tragic death. Now, this was a 39-year-old Dutch diver that was working for SMIT Maritime, one of the largest salvers in the world. So I'm assuming that everyone on board here did their due diligence, and this must have been some sort of freak accident. I feel like it's far more likely for a diver to accidentally hit a pocket of gas and a tragic explosion to occur, rather than a diver cutting a section of this mast underwater and it somehow fell on him. In the diving industry, we are always aware of our surroundings, especially in a large operation like this, early into the operation where everyone is still fresh. They're going to have live feed cameras on all of the divers. This diving soup, the supervisor, is going to be watching the divers very closely during this operation. Now, I'm also assuming that they had 2 divers down there, as it was reported that there's about 40 divers working on this operation. So they probably had 2 divers down there at a time. It is truly tragic that another incident occurred on the Bayesian, and my deepest condolences go out to the diver and everyone that knew him. Now, I did find a GoFundMe for Rob Hoijbeen. This is obviously going to the family that is going to help with these unexpected costs of this tragic death and this tragic incident. So I have a link below if you guys would like to contribute. This accident just highlights the dangerous nature of commercial diving work and how quickly conditions can change, even for the most experienced professionals. Now, the cost for this project is pretty significant already, and it's growing day by day. And now we have another setback, so it's unclear just how long this is going to extend this timeline. So let's hope that with these setbacks, the operation can continue safely and bring closure to all those involved. I've already done a deep dive into the Bayesians, so if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave it in the description. But I will keep you guys updated on this developing story and the salvage operation as it unfolds. As always, guys, dive safe. SSP Diving out.